Okay, welcome everybody. Time is, by my watch, 6:03, 11th of May 2021, Tuesday. This is an agenda briefing. I'm just going to follow this run sheet. I got called up quite late for this, so I'll do the best I can. Thank you. Declaration of opening announcement of visitors and disclaimer. I now declare the agenda briefing of the 11th of May 2020 open at 6:03. We acknowledge the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of the land. We also pay our respects to elders both past and present. Tonight's meeting is for the purpose of asking questions and seeking clarification on agenda items for the ordinary OCM, Ordinary Council meeting. No decision making or entering into debate is to occur at this meeting. May I ask everyone present this evening to turn off all electronic devices for the duration of the meeting, because this seems to interfere with our wonderful Bosch Wi-Fi microphones. Tonight's agenda briefing is being recorded. A copy of the audio recording shall be available on the City's website within 72 hours of the meeting. ABs are public meetings, and any information you provide may be publicly accessible. Disclosure of interest. The prescribed disclosure requirements apply to meetings that are convened under the Local Government Act. However, it may be perceived or ethically unacceptable or at odds with the probity and accountability principles of the Act and codes of conduct for elected members to participate in forums, briefings or workshops where they are aware they have a conflict of interest and do not declare. In the interest of openness and accountability, elected members are encouraged to disclose a conflict of interest where they are aware they have one. So basically, to paraphrase, if you think you've got a conflict of interest, probably better to put it in than not put it in, unless it makes some problems later or some perception of problem. If it's named that you have a conflict of interest, they may be asked to leave the room while the matter is being discussed. Point 2, attendance, apologies. There are no apologies tonight. Well, actually, is the Mayor making an apology? The Mayor has made an apology, so that needs to be amended. 2.2, approved leave of absence. There are no approved leaves of absence. Disclosure of interest, I haven't received any. Yes. I have? Oh. Okay, the CEO, please read that out.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I have a disclosure of interest from Councillor Sweeney. It's in relation to item number EN-008-21. The title of the report is Loan Funding Wilderton Basketball Club. The type of interest, financial. The councillor has indicated that the nature of interest is he is a member of the Wilderton Basketball Club. When this item comes up, the councillor will read this out and then leave the room.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Sweeney, for that declaration of interest. If throughout the meeting, if you feel that you want to put something up, I believe you can do it during the meeting too, if you would like. Yes, Councillor Barry.
Just like to say that from my perspective, at this stage I probably won't be able to ask any questions unless have we got deputations? I mean, it's just that I haven't got in my draft agenda
the deputation.
Yeah, I don't have on my agenda EN-08. So in saying that, it makes it a little bit difficult. I'll read while the deputations are going on. I apologise to the gallery for that, but nevertheless I have to, and would ask that it please be included on my OCM agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barry, and we're looking forward to having a few questions from you later on tonight. So where's that? Approved? I've done that. Questions for public. Response to previous questions taken on notice. Responses to previous questions taken on notice will be noted in the Ordinary Council meeting agenda. I'll just put the time in this sheet. Okay, we go to 4.2, questions from the public. I'll just read this preamble here. The time set aside for public questions is 15 minutes, which may be extended if necessary. That's usually at the discretion of the presiding member, and it can be extended for another 15 minutes. And we do that if you have questions. We're happy to do that. I'm not going to say you're out of time if you have a question. It's concerning this particular AB. The question must relate to the items listed on the agenda paper. For recording purposes, please state your name and address and then proceed to ask your question. And there's a microphone just there, and when it goes on, it's red, and that's when you're recording and we can hear you, and it's important for the record. We might be able to hear you, but we need to record you too. So we can hear all the fantastic things you've got to say about the city. If an answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the question will be taken on notice and an answer will be provided at the next OCM. OCM being Ordinary Council Meeting, and I'll use that abbreviation henceforth. In accordance with policy AD.02, members of the public who have registered their interest to ask questions with the city's administration shall be called upon in the order in which the registrations were received. Written questions will precede verbal questions. I now open question time at 6:09 p.m. And the city has, I do believe there is a question register, and I'll go off that. I'll give this person, apologies if I haven't got this name completely right, but it's Rajesh Tenja from Willerton. It's a verbal question, and I think the subject is regarding report CE 0721. So I'd invite you to ask your questions. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks to everyone for all the hard work you guys are doing for the community. I really appreciate that. I was looking at the agenda. It just came to my light, and I want to ask you guys a question. Probably I have to put my address. It's 3 Catherine Place, Willerton, for the record. The question is regarding CC 01721. It's live streaming and for the council and committee meetings. What I can see from the agenda is it's all the cons which has been put forward, like defamation, infringement of copyrights and all that stuff. But I can't see anything positive in those points. Like you guys are doing an amazing job. It's not highlighted to anyone except the work which is seen by the people. So with the live streaming and audiovisual, people can be engaged. Like me, it's very hard for me to leave the kids at home and come here for the meetings. So as a normal person, I can't really engage you myself and give you guys a feedback of where our pain points are in the community. With the live streaming, we can give some feedback where we are, what really needs to be done for the community rather than just not engage at all. Also, it'll actually open up a lot of transparency, openness, fairness, what decisions are made, and if community has any feedback for you guys, they can give. In addition to that, it'll promote all the hard work which you guys are doing. Really, that's all hidden behind the scenes. And all the cons which have been mentioned, it's actually, you are already doing the audio recordings. It's already public. There's nothing to hide. And I think that should be all available to public live so that people can engage. And especially
sorry, excuse me. I'm sure you're getting to the question, and I know you're just about to get to the question. So could you get to the question? Thank you.
Yeah, the question is why this hasn't been done for so long while the other councils have actually implemented it, and they are the people are already getting engaged with these things.
Thank you. I'll get Director Kane to answer that for you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The report notes that this matter has previously been considered by Council and a decision made a number of years ago. At that time, a decision was made not to proceed with live streaming. The report also knows that notes what the additional cost would be to implement this. One of the key considerations for us, as you've probably seen tonight, is our technology around the table is a little old, and it does need to be replaced, and we're budgeting for that in this coming financial year. So if Council were looking to do anything, the time would be to try and do the two at once and not independent of each other.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate if you guys can consider this again because it'll really help community engage with the council and committee. That'll be all. Thank you very much.
Quickly, it did come a few years ago, but it has to be a council's decision, and at the time the council didn't, as the director said, it's a political decision. So I'm sure if you want to talk to any of the councillors about it, they'll be happy to listen to your viewpoints, which you've actually done tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, but the cost which seems to be on the paper in the agenda, it's not really substantial as compared to what we are paying for the rest of the things. Well,
Could you put, well, I'm happy to entertain that, but if you just put that into a question, I can ask the director that.
All right, the cost for it is around 15 to 25,000 for the live streaming, which has been set in the agenda. And if you look at what we are putting in the grounds for just the lighting is 10 grand to 15 grand. So I think having community engagement is much more important than just putting the lights in the gardens. So that doesn't make any sense to me. So can you substantiate, like, having a community engagement, like I'm the only person I think available here from the public today to ask a question. I'm not sure how many people normally get here to engage with you people and tell where the problems are. So it'll be nice if a community engagement is really considered and your hard work and your things will be shown to the people. It's more of a comment than a question now, because I really don't have the numbers.
If you've got a question, hit me with it now. If you're not, I'll have to thank you for coming.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else from the gallery that'd like to ask a question? I believe Mr. Aldrich. Yeah, you put your, well, who's the other gentleman? Robert Swain. Please, if you just come up and if you stand, that's okay. If you wanted to sit, we can get you that chair too, whatever you like.
My name is Robert Sewin, Justice of the Peace, 40 Central Road, Rossmoyne. My connection is with the referencee in 00721. The motion carried at the AGM, electors motion. Deputy Mayor, I'm conscious of your role on council, and all of the councillors, I have deference to the responsibility you attracted to yourselves as officers of this council. This question evidence is provided for you to address how you intend to perform your roles as in the interest of electors, ratepayers, residents, providing leadership and guidance, facilitating communication between community and the council participating in the decision process supporting the elector motion EN 00721 that's before the council. First is to remedy a misleading detail, minute para 15, reported for councillors' reference. The misleading detail, in order to increase the area of parkland available for public recreation, recognising that urban infill has increased the population pressure on the parkland. The correct detail for reference of the councillors is that between 1960 and 1980, the Park Reserve foreshore as a sustained public open space was extensively eroded by some 20 to 25% of its reserve land area depleted from the public recreation. Secondly, there's misleading detail omitted from the councils for the reference is there will be no loss of public open space throughout the city without adequate replacement within its recognised...
Sorry, this is your deputation. I'm happy for you to proceed, but I just wanted to tell everyone this is your deputation. So I'll let it go and we'll come back for the questions if you like that, or you can ask your questions now and do the deputation later.
Well, I interpreted the agenda, you see, that this was to be a question tonight and a deputation next week.
I've got you here as a deputation, so I think if you've got the floor, continue. Just got to make sure.
Well, thank you kindly. I'll run through this, but
Yep.
I'm not going away.
And just be mindful, we were happy to let you go, but there's a time constraint and there's a little light down there, and when you've got 30 seconds left, it'll be orange, and when you run out of time, it'll be red. And we're usually pretty strict with the time.
I'll be as quick as I can.
Thank you.
Second, the remedy misleading detail that there will be no loss of public open space replacement within the catchment, wherein the council's strategic plan theme lead council has no action plan to adopt council's public open space strategy medium-term policy strategic citywide recommendation 10.1 1.522. The third remedy to be misleading detail, as reported, is related to the resolution decision of the ordinary council meeting 16th of March 21, wherein Councillor Cruz seconded Councillor Spencer Teo that council received the feedback from the community on the 3 Shelley Beach Park master plan options, and it too endorses option 2 as the preferred option for the upgrade to the Shelley Beach Park, wherein the minute is definitive. Community November 2018 petition update to paragraph 105 contains 1,844 signatures, which directed Councillor Cruz and Councillor Spencer Teo to support the Living Stream Master Plan 3 cafe restaurant to community consultation. Council to include the establishment of a cafe restaurant within the Shelley Beach Park precinct at a location to be through community consultation. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor and Councillors, faced with your leadership responsibility and interest of electors, ratepayers and residents in your decision making, how do you as council officers propose to reduce the housing infill net loss of public open space to appease the community stress levels and anger within the next 5 years from the ecological impost of increased foreshore catchment range runoff? Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Robert Swain. I greatly appreciate, and I'm sure many of the councillors appreciate you coming down, and we always appreciate you coming down and giving your perspective. I know you're very passionate about that issue, so thank you for your attendance tonight. Thank you. I would now ask for any other questions. I know that Mr. Aldridge, you've got some questions. If you come forward, thank you.
Richard Aldridge, 5 Minota Avenue. Good afternoon, Council. My question is regarding Plan 2 with the playground area. On Plan 2, when you look at it, there's a grey area and there's a yellow area. I was after the actual area, which is the yellow area, which is the bit which actually has the playground equipment in it, if that's possible, please.
Mr. Director Bowe, if you could please answer, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Yes, that is possible, and we've endeavoured to provide you with information, Mr. Aldridge, but if we haven't provided the information that you're after, I'm happy to take that offline, and I'm sure our manager, Mr. Johnson, will be able to assist you.
Thank you very much. My second question is, with 48 Corinthian Avenue, there's an example where someone had a couple of houses being built next to them with 12 toilets and 12 bedrooms. And they were upset and they raised a petition with 256 signatures and it still got passed through. What is the process for a ratepayer if they don't want a development of any kind being built next to them to get that before council?
Thanks, Mr. Director Bowe, please. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Been put in the trouble. Have to redirect. Director Brad.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly each year you can appreciate that there's probably 700 or 800 applications per year that come to council that relate to planning matters. So every council in WA has a delegated authority that council grants to the CEO, and that is then sub-delegated to particular staff depending on their level of experience. So in terms of our delegations that council imposes at the moment. There's very clear guidance if there are planning matters that are referred out to the public, and if submissions are made, then if those submissions are valid and can't be satisfied through conditions, it will come to council.
Thank you. And in the case of people just objecting to a particular development, is there any process where they can bring that to before council for it to make it a council decision, not a planning department's decision?
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor. Certainly there is, as I said before, delegated authority. So there is clear processes in relation to how community submissions are received and processed. At the end of the day, if a decision is delegated to the administration will make that decision. There are opportunities, depending on whether it's the applicant, to take the matter to the State Administrative Tribunal. But certainly if every person who objected to a development was somehow able to take it to council, there would certainly, the number of applications would dominate the agenda to the point where the number of meetings would have to be increased significantly.
Thank you very much for your time, council.
Thank you, Mr. Aldrich. I know that you regularly come down here and ask questions. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question? That being the case, last calls, last round. Okay, the time is 6:26. I now declare question time closed. First deputation, we've already done that one. So I now need to call Mr. Granali. I'm sorry, my pronunciation is the best I can, but if you come forward, and you've got 10 minutes. The lights are the same, green, and then when you're running out of time, it's orange for 30 seconds, and then red is pretty much the cut-off time. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Gianpaolo Corniale, good Australian name, and thank you for letting me speak in front of you. Currently, we're looking at a property which council owns on Centre Street, and we've put forward a submission for that property. So just to speak a little bit about myself and my partner, Paul, who's unable to be here because he's over east. So we have a couple of companies called WAI Group and Fortitude Living. So we're undertaking a number of disability and affordable housing projects from Geraldton to Bunbury to Albany and to Perth. So part of, I guess, for us to sort of look at the property in the City of Canning is because that's in the zone where we need to provide a number of disability projects for a couple of the top tier 1 sort of disability and affordable housing providers in Australia. So with that, we saw an opportunity with this land as being a bit of a zone that we need to provide, probably about 20. We've currently got another application in for planning approval with the City of Canning, alongside with Carlisle as well nearby, and we're about to undertake 8 group dwellings up in High Wycombe, and then all the way down to Hamilton Hill. So we've got a bit on our plate. We've got a pipeline of projects for the next 5 years, which is to deliver disability and affordable housing in WA. So my background is I'm an architect and a builder. Paul is more on the financial side of things, and so that's where we sort of put forward the proposal that I'm sure you've all had a look at, and to sort of work through the 12-unit development there, which has a mixture of disability and affordable housing in there. So I think that's so essentially really was to come here and just introduce myself. I'm sure there'll be a number of times I either get to speak in front of you because of what we need to deliver over the coming years, and we're sort of also looking at another project nearby, which is for another sort of not-for-profit group, and so that's sort of me in a nutshell, just to keep it simple and short. And I welcome the opportunity, and I look forward to speaking and meeting with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your interest in Canning and the potential investment in Canning and in that important field that you were talked on. Okay, I will now move to number 3, deputation. A deputation has been approved for Mr. Richard G regarding CC 02221 proposed sale of lot 114 Vulcan Road, Canning Vale. And again, your maximum time is 10 minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, first, thank you for the opportunity to address you regarding the land at 30 Vulcan Road in Canning Vale. My name is Richard G, and my family and I live in Dianella. The other three gentlemen are members of the Board of Trustees of the Assembly in Perth, of which I am the chairman. The Assembly in Perth is a church recognized by the Australian government. It is also a recognized charitable and non-profit organization under the ACNC. The Assembly in Perth was registered in June 2000, and over the 20 years has expanded significantly. The average weekly church attendance is about 200, comprising around 90 adults, 80 children, and 30 teenagers. Because of the increase, the meeting hall at Bentley is inadequate to meet the needs. Over the last few years, in addition to the Bentley Hall, we have been using Rosemoyne High and Churchland High, but this is only a temporary arrangement as part of the two schools' community services. We have inspected the council land at Canning Vale, and its size and locality suits our needs well. Its area of 8,000 square meters with about 4,000 square meters of buildable space with empty provisions for car parks and public open space is ideal for us. Additionally, we have members staying in the northern, eastern, and southern suburb, and the traveling time ranges from 10 to 35 minutes. A significant number of the church members stay around the Canning Vale area. We have the financial capacity to purchase and develop the land. Our development plan is not only to blend well, but also to enhance the environment in the area. Additionally, we plan through the development to bring more activities and life there. Our budget for the construction of the building and ancillary uses is about $2 million. We are open to proposals from the council and will incorporate them into the development plan as far as possible. Thank you for your attention. I will now hand over to Tony Cleary to continue with the presentation.
Deputy Mayor Jacobs, councillors, thanks for your time. My name is Anthony Cleary of 4 Old Nursery Lane in Willetton, and we'd just like to excuse a little overlap, but we'd just like to just highlight 4 main points just for your consideration in view of our submission. From our perspective, the Assembly in Perth is in a very positive situation. Start being from the year 2000, where we had attendance of around 20, up until today, where our attendance is regular weekly attendance is over 200, and casual attendance is over 300. Not only is the increase in attendance encouraging to us, but also the fact that those attending are predominantly young families. You can see a high number of high schoolers and children pointing towards a positive future in our mind. We have the target in another 10 years to be over 400. As Richard's identified, our current meeting hall is inadequate for us to all be meeting together. In terms of our demographic, we have a meeting place in the north and 2 in the south. The majority, it's fair to say, are in the city of Canning, and a number of families live in Canning Vale itself, and of course the suburbs then around it. In terms of the services that we currently provide, I think, as you can imagine, numerous Sunday services, worship services, there's multiple children meetings throughout the week for the high schoolers as well, university age, coordination and planning meetings, as I think you can very well imagine. We have a rich calendar throughout the year of conferences and trainings, particularly this matter where we can, there's the need for us to have opportunity to all meet together, as well as our practice where possible to meet all 3 districts together once a month. Just going to the second slide, in our consideration of this property, I mean, we've been looking for a suitable property for a number of years now, and we recognise in this property it's ideal in terms of noise. The highway will block us out better than anything else, but there's not residential houses around that might be disturbed over the weekend or the evenings. There'd be ample car parking, which is another matter that we often run into with looking at potential places. So with plenty within the easement and setback. The location is ideal, being accessible from Roe Highway, the major roads, highway and public transport that's going in there. And then very positively, we feel this not only meets the current need, but has much potential for future expansion. So meeting the need not just in this generation, but even generations to come. So we'd see much potential for extension into outdoor activities and landscaping of that property. In terms of our consideration, we've carried out a project review, and at this point we'll be looking at a single, maybe partial double-storey building, approximately 1,200 square metres. We'd have a main meeting hall of which would be able to hold 500, could be split into 2, 10 multi-function rooms, kitchen, dining area, outdoor garden playground, and obviously lots of car parking. Our current estimate is that development cost would be $2 million. And as mentioned, there's a strong potential for a second stage as we'd be able to develop it, to have facilities for, say, for indoor basketball, badminton, volleyball, and so on. So we thank you for your time and your consideration of the matter.
Thank you for attending your interest in Canning, and I recognise the important role your church plays in our city, so God bless. The next deputation has been approved. Is it Bruce? Did you just speak then? Or is that another one? Okay, yep. Bruce Cameron, CC 02221, proposed sale lot of 114 Vulcan Road, Canning Vale. And again, you have 10 minutes and the lights should be on when you start. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and good evening, councillors, and the CEO and the officers and staff of the city and visitors as well. My name is Bruce Cameron. I'm the Managing Director of Camco Engineering. We've been participating in the Canning Vale Industrial Precinct for over a quarter of a century, having commenced there in 1995. And tonight I'm speaking, giving a deputation on our proposal to acquire the Lot 2 Vulcan Road, which is quite adjacent to our other existing facilities. There's a lot of words in the presentation, so I'm not going to actually speak to every word. It's there for councillors to review between now and the full council meeting, should they so wish. But one of the key things that's eventuated for us in the last few weeks is that after nearly 2 years of working on developing a pathway to get defence sector work to increase our diversity, I guess, and our ability to survive in a changing world as an industrial enterprise. We've done many things in terms of achieving accreditation to do defence work, but we have also discovered that we need some additional specialised equipment, and we really need to establish a centre for advanced manufacturing that will meet the standards required of the global equipment manufacturers that are wishing to sell their equipment to the Australian government. And the Australian government is putting more pressure on them to ensure that there's local content and that Australia, I guess, regains some of its sovereign capability that it's lost over probably the last 50 years in terms of winding back on manufacturing activities in some areas. So in order for us to establish this facility of advanced manufacturing capability and to house some specialised equipment, we would need to build some additional workshop facilities. And this piece of land, although it's an unusual shape, provides us the opportunity to achieve what we would need to achieve. We've drawn a very rudimentary layout of how we can fit a typical workshop that suits our needs. Camco Engineering typically builds long rectangular buildings. At the bottom corner you'll see an existing building that's quite close to this piece of land that's on the corner of Bell Street and Vulcan Road. We take a lot of pride in our presentation of our properties, and I think if you drove around the industrial precinct you'd probably rank us in the top 5 percentile of property presentation, and I think that that's something that we contribute to the community in that sense. The approach to developing this property would be no different to what we've done on our other properties. We're just completing 2 major construction projects at the moment that were to meet mining company needs in terms of our expansion, and that's on our properties on either side of Bell Street on the corner of Vulcan Road. If councillors go past, you'll see, I think you'll be quite impressed with what we've done. There's a slide here that gives an indication of the specialised machines. We certainly know that there's no machines of this capacity and capability in Western Australia, and we believe that there's only one other somewhere else in Australia on the eastern seaboard. And by being able to establish a facility that has this sort of equipment, we can not only increase employment in the industrial precinct, but we can attract very significant global attention in terms of global companies that would normally get their manufacturing done in Europe would give us serious consideration to do that work in Australia. One of the things that Camco Engineering takes a lot of pride in is that it contributes to a prosperous and thriving local economy. We see ourselves as being a significant employer and have done so for the last 25 years we've operated in Canning Vale. The ability for us to continue to grow our business will just attract more and more employees into the area, and generally we find that once we get employees we keep them for the long term, and we find a lot of our employees eventually relocate if they're sick and tired of driving too far. So we've probably got about 30% of our workforce in the city of Canning or in the immediately adjacent suburbs. The other thing that we work hard on is engaging with local suppliers, other small to medium enterprises within the city of Canning. And we did an analysis, and I was quite surprised that we're spending a bit over $1 million a month over the past 2 years just simply with local suppliers. We work with them to improve their own systems. We're a business that currently has nearly 350 employees, and we've got very sophisticated systems to be able to deal with very sophisticated customers. So we certainly contribute in that sense as well. And that sort of spend doesn't count for the money that our employees spend out of pocket going to the lunch bars and going to the local shops around the area on the way home or whatever. There's a lot of potential there for a contribution as well. The other thing that we've shown a very tangible commitment to spending money on assets and development in the city, in the Canning Vale industrial precinct, part of the city of Canning. We've been active in the area since 1995. Since 2010, we've constructed 10,000 square metres of high-class factory workshop space. We're committed to developing our staff. We're committed to attracting people long-term. we've got a very strong Indigenous engagement program, and we're proud of what we've done in the area. There's a slide at the end, second last slide, that sort of talks graphically about what Camco is, the sectors where we get our work from. But Camco is Canning Vale Industrial Precinct. We've got one facility still in Belmont that we're working hard to bring across shortly into the new factories we're building. But we're pretty much a Canning Vale company. In March, we were very privileged to get the Governor of Western Australia, the Honourable Kim Beazley, to come and open our first new factory that we just completed. It's about 1,800 square metres, very high quality, with 3 overhead gantry cranes. We can do lifts of jobs up to 80 tonnes. And we've just recently applied for a grant to assist us with the acquisition of the specialised equipment that we need. The federal government is offering grants to improve the manufacturing capability of Australian companies like ours. And the Governor was very generous in writing a reference letter for us that echoed what he saw when he visited our premises. And the bottom left-hand photo is just taken on the same day as we opened the facility, showing that there's a real community. You know, Camco Engineering is a community-based business. We work on people being our best asset, and we continually work on that philosophy and enhancing it. So I commend our proposal to the Council for its consideration, and I thank you very much for the time you've given me to speak to it tonight. Thank you.
It's glad to see you again so soon, Mr. Cameron, and we greatly appreciate Camco's contribution to our local economy. And I personally regard you as one of our area champions, so I'm so pleased to hear that you're moving even more stuff to Canning. That's great. Thank you. Okay, number 5, a deputation has been approved for Mr. Jack Johnson regarding CC 02321, proposed sale of lot 62, 670 Centre Street, Queen's Park. Same deal, 10 minutes, and the lights will lead the way. Thank you.
Hello, Deputy Mayor, councillors and members of the public. I'm a graduate architect by the name of Jack Johnson, and tonight I'll be representing PDRP Proprietary Limited and CX Transport Proprietary Limited regarding the purchase of 67 Centre Street, Queen's Park. If chosen for the purchase of said block, we hope to design and build a state-of-the-art early learning daycare centre that aims to fit into the streetscape, benefit the local community, generate local jobs and help with traffic circulation. As a team, we've already presented our rough concept drawings to leasing agents around the area who look after several daycare centres. They have shown great interest in our potential development and are already starting to discuss the possibility of having a childcare operator such as Good Start or Buggles managing the daycare in the future. Based on our research shown on screen, there's only one daycare within a 500-metre radius of 67 Centre Street and 2 in the whole of Queen's Park, both of which were built 2 or more years ago. And then according to the bottom left figure from realestate.com, it shows that the second highest population demographic also belongs to established couples and young families. Thus, we feel a new childcare centre would greatly benefit the community. According to the Queen's Park local structure plan, 67 Centre Street also sits in the railway frame precinct and states a daycare as one of its preferred uses for any block in said precinct, which has also aided in our decision to develop a daycare. Our team also has extensive knowledge in the construction industry, owning businesses such as Metwest Steel, Metro Steel, Luxwin Windows and Metwest Building Supplies. And over the last few years, we've been involved with thousands of commercial and residential jobs. Together, we've all also recently worked together on our own developments, and we believe that 67 Centre Street could be our next step. I'd like to just briefly touch over our vision for the site. So based on our first site visit and feedback from the council, our vision was to elevate the daycare and put the parking in the rear, so that we could so there would be no traffic congestion on Centre Street, and that we could address both streets of the corner block. Moving into a 3D space, our concept design aims to bring life to the streetscape with its fun design elements, but also still fit in with its mostly 2-storey / 1-storey surroundings. Lastly, I'd like to just briefly touch on some capacity and possibilities. We estimate that the childcare will be able to cater for 80 children from 0 to 5 at any particular time, and will generate 5 to 10 local jobs in the area. And these are some of our rough plans. But yeah, thank you very much. That concludes the presentation.
Thanks, Mr. Johnson, and welcome to Canning. And that looks very like innovative architecture. Number 5, items brought forward for the convenience of those in the public gallery. There are none. Reports of committee meetings. There are none. We move on to 7, reports. Chief Executive Officer, there's no reports there. 7.2, Mr. Stephen Kane, Director, Canning Corporate and Commercial. We do have one, CC 01721. It's regarding the motion live streaming of council and committee meetings. The recommendation is on page 4 of the agenda, is on the screen now. And councillors, do we have any questions? I do see a few questions. Councillor Barry, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering if we could get an answer as to what possibly would happen on page 11.17. The option also requires that protocols are established. For example, what would members of the public see or hear behind closed doors or confidential? Maybe if I asked through you to Director Kane, because I think you at Coburn, what was the situation there? Thank you.
I think he said through the... Oh, yeah, I'll... sorry, I thought he was going to go direct, but that's... Yes, Director, please. Thank you.
Thank you. It varies at a number of councils. So, for instance, my own local area in Vincent, they cease all recording at certain times. So there's nothing visible to the members of the public. For any matters that went behind closed doors, that you'd also cease all recording. They'd continue the general recording for their own purposes, but not played to the public. So anything that's confidential under the Local Government Act is not live streamed.
Councillor Pondicherry.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The report last year, the state government actually adopted the local government review panel final report. So I would like to ask this question to Director Steve Kane. So did you actually read on that point 55, the recommendations in relation to governance the panel recommends?
And Director, when you're ready, please go ahead and answer. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, what was the reference? What number reference was it, and in what report is the reference?
The local government review panel final report from the DLGSC was recommended on point 55 in relation to the governance the panel recommends. In E is as a minimum audio recordings of public parts of council meetings should be available on the local governance, which is very old-fashioned, which is still there, on website when the minutes become available, with live streaming to be encouraged. And again, on further down, it said, while webcasting, live streaming of council meetings was the preferred option, given the technology constraints that could be experienced by some local governments, and then the audio recordings are preferred. So this was already being recommended a part of the state government, local government review panel for last year final report, which we should probably consider that too. We often speak about that. So I'm just wondering whether did Director Kane and the team did look at this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As you'd note in the recommendation, we're certainly saying to consider live streaming in financial year 22-23. Part of the rationale behind that is we do have to do a technology upgrade of the whole of the suite here, and just introducing one component without the other would be a problem. For local governments that do live stream that want it to be fully interactive, there are two other considerations. Firstly, you can't just set up a camera system that looks at the chamber, or you can, but it's no different to listening to the recording. So if you want an operator to be then featuring the people who come to the rostrum to make deputations, or referring to what's on the screen, we'll need an extra staff member to sit down here during the council meeting. So that in itself will add an additional operating cost, which we don't quantify in this, but we refer to in the report. As you would know from the city's financial position, we're not trying to add additional costs next financial year. So we've tried to bring two things together. A recommendation that when we do the capital upgrade for all the equipment, yes, look at live streaming as part of that. And then when we're in a better financial position, be in the position to have an extra staff member sitting here.
Excuse me, could I just clarify one thing? Live streaming or live video streaming?
Through the chair.
Yes, Director.
Yeah, thank you. Live video streaming. So you can live stream the audio, and you don't need anyone sitting here. We'll just pick it up and carry it straight away. That's why we say the additional cost is only $8,000, and we'd fully support introducing the live audio. But if you want to do the live video, so tonight we've had 3 or 5 people come up and do presentations. They've all referred to presentations on the screen. If we just had a series of cameras that looked at the chamber, then people sitting at home wouldn't see or any of that detail. They'd better hear it, but it would be no different to listening to the live audio stream.
It wasn't what I was getting at. I mean, I think if you were referring to live streaming, it should have been stipulated that it was live video streaming. That's all I was getting at. Nothing more than that.
Councillor Pontori.
Thank you. Sorry, that's all right. Okay. But also given that we have looked at through the long-term financial planning, or we need to look at in more detail about the asset management strategy. So why wasn't this looked at it until I brought this as a notice of motion to be looking at these assets in these chambers needed some renewal and upgrading? I have a few more questions, but just one of my questions. Thank you.
Director?
Unfortunately, I can't answer that because I wasn't here at the time. That process, the asset management plannings were all presented. So having started here in late January, mid-January, the process for doing the asset management plan for the IT had been well and truly started. I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor, and that I think it's essential that we have a good asset management plan, particularly for this type of ICT infrastructure.
But it's not that probably expected, because obviously it's not about that when we looked at what the asset management plan. So it is definitely then telling me that our asset management register doesn't tell you straight away, or any of us, where what the assets dying when. So it shouldn't wait for one of us to be bringing us an initiative. So maybe if I look at it under the ICT fixtures, so it should be able to pick up the current system is not going to cope up and we need upgrading. So it shouldn't be waiting for a notice of motion to come. So I'm not even talking about something before January this time, but we've just only last night we adopted the long-term financial planning. So it's definitely telling me even till tonight that there is a loophole on that, we need to fix it. So this should be highlighting something coming up and we need to be upgrading that. So that's my question is. So why is that not alerting us then? How do we do that?
Go first with Director Kane, and then we'll go with Director Bowe, if that's all right. Is that all right? Happy with that? Yep. Thank you, and the intent is to have all of the asset management plans complete by the end of this year, and Director Bowe referred to that. The ICT doesn't have a comprehensive asset management plan. It has an asset condition and status report. Many of the ICT assets we own, also we use, aren't owned. They're leased by the city and rotated. So I've been going through with the staff for the last couple of months now on the quality and condition of each of those, and also looking to see which assets we can potentially take out and retire and replace them with leased assets, so we simply don't have this issue come up again. I agree with you, Councillor, that the assets such as this have a fixed life, they should have a fixed condition, and they're put into a plan to replace them. And that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Are we able to tell, is it on the register at least, since it's alerting us? So it's just my question, is that already on the register?
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The asset register doesn't tell you the condition of the assets that are on it. It just simply tells you what is on the register. And the simple answer is that in 2017, when this matter was first considered, the city didn't have an ICT asset management plan. As Director Kane said, we were working towards delivering one.
Councillor Bain. We'll come back to you. Just hold fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Paragraph 16 lists a number of potential risks associated with audio live streaming. Do those same potential risks exist with the current format that we have with audio recording? Thank you.
Director Bain. Oh, sorry, Kane. Oh, what's happened? Sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, the same risks apply to anything, particularly around the issue of what you say. The difference is once it's live, it's instantaneous. So if you did make a statement and it was sought afterwards to be, there was some other control mechanism put on top of it, it could be withheld. One of the things that in my last place of employment at Coburn, it was live, but it had a delay mechanism in it. So if someone stood up, for instance, a public gallery and made comments which were derogatory or particularly abusive or racially vilified someone, and council said it's not our intention to want to see that material put into the public domain, it could mute that, pretty much like the TV stations do if you get up and use an expletive in morning news.
Just hold it. We'll come back to you. We'll give you the last question if that's all right. I'll do a question then, but we'll first go to Councillor Spencer Tia, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just a little bit confused. I think it may have been something that was said in the deputation. Are we talking about interactive live videoing or one way? So people at home can't interact, ask questions or anything like that, can they?
Director Kane?
No, it's a one way. It's like watching television.
I've got a question, but look, you go first, and I've written it down. I can remember it. Councillor Pontero.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Given that Director Kane has actually implemented this system in City of Coburn, and they have got it on live streaming. And also I did ask a question about were you able to get the pricing from the other councils as well? How are they managing? Obviously, Town of Windsor and Town of Wick Park, we often talk about we are the first tier of council and we are thriving and all about that, we should be championing. So how are they managing with the number of staff? Because I think I asked a question probably 3 weeks ago in the context so that we'll also know the pricing, how much does it cost labor for someone to sit and manage that. So we obviously do have two governance staff. I'm not saying they're sitting and doing nothing, but there must be a technical, high technical way of doing all of this, more interactive way between live streaming and this minutes going up. And so there must, so was that fulfill that question? Would you like to answer? Thank you.
Director Kane.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In some cases, councils just simply show the chamber. They're fixed cameras, they don't vary, they don't go around the room, they don't tilt and zoom. So the additional cost is no additional staff, it's just the technology. It depends what you want. If you want, as I said at Vincent, where they zoom in onto the speakers who are sitting behind, in this case, back in Coburn in those days, they didn't have any of the screens around the room, so they weren't worried about putting up deputations for people to see. The more complexity you introduce, the greater the cost. So if we have a minute clerk here is recording all of the issues tonight, she wouldn't be able to add that functionality on in case she stops recording or does something wrong. We have a governance support officer who may or may not be able to put it in, but as said, that would depend on the type of additional duties we gave to that individual. Hence, it's the old issue, how long's a piece of string? What do you really want to do with the technology? In Coburn, we were replacing all of the suite. So we weren't just putting cameras in, we were replacing all of the materials that councils used to vote, etc. It was able to be done as a much larger package of capital improvement.
I think we were fairly clear that we'll have a live streaming. So just to do the basic live streaming, you need the cameras, and so that can be focused on the chambers. And so people can actually watch the real time. I'm a little bit disappointed, as Councillor Bain asked the question number 16, all those potential risk is already on the audio, and how can that be a reason for the video to be going in? So are we meant to say that we are already sitting on a time bomb and all of this risk, and so don't go on video, or is that being otherwise edited? That's my question. If that's the case, how can we reason that for the video?
Director Kane.
Everything that an elected member says in the chamber here is recorded. From that perspective, it becomes a public record on the State Record Keeping Plan or Act. Therefore, you can, if you do say something which is inflammatory, defamatory, etc., the public can get a hold of that. The difference is it might take them a few days to get a hold of it. If you say it on a live stream, on a video, it's recorded instantly. Someone could copy that straight away and put it out that night. So you end up with a faster turnaround in the nature. It's just an extension of the risks that you already have. You have these risks now. We have these risks now.
Sorry, I'm just finishing, Councillor Holland. I'm not, Director Kane, and that is not acceptable because we all took oath and we all been elected by the City of Canning people to come and act professionally and ethically, and that's why I'm talking about myself.
Can we just, I know what you're saying, and you can say it, but can you put it into a question?
Yeah, I'm getting to the question, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
And so how can we say whether we put in on a live streaming is different to what we put in on an audio recording, because it is still the defamation. So we shouldn't be making any comments about anyone or anybody at all, because it's the same impact it has whether I say today or tomorrow, because it is my position. I'm saying it today until I hold this position.
So your question is,
how
like,
can
I'm
that be
waiting for it,
different?
I'm waiting for it. There's only a certain amount of time I can wait for the question before it's sort of, if you know what I mean. I know you're trying to ask a question, but if you just...
sorry.
Just a question, so I can clarify in my mind what you're actually asking, so the director can help you with it.
I said, what is the difference between live streaming, defamation, and I know you just said, and the defamation, what do I make it even tomorrow somebody's listening? What is the difference? I am still made a defame. So how does it different? That's what I want to know.
Director Kane.
The media cycle works something like this. If you say something, it's news tomorrow. So currently, if you said something in the chamber and it wasn't known to people until the audio recording was released, no one would necessarily knew what you said. If you say something, anyone, a staff member, a member of the public, who says something which is contrary to those rules of standard behaviour, it can be on the news cycle instantaneously. And I've seen it, where a council have recorded what they said and it was straight on Facebook that night and into the newspaper cycle the next morning. So it speeds the whole process up. Now, I think each of us come here with the intent to behave in the standards you've referred to, and that's what the rules of conduct required. If people have that aberration and say something they didn't intend to, it's in the media immediately.
We'll come back to you. Councillor Spencer-Tier.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. With our current system, this is kind of a hypothetical, but it's not. If confidentiality was accidentally breached, would we go back and edit the audio before putting it on the website the following day?
Director Kane.
I think the city would be in a position to get legal advice and determine whether it did have that right to be able to extract the comments. Certainly, as I use the example of when people live stream, but it's not actually live, there's a delay so they can block things out. And that's another example of, well, technically you're doctoring the material, but you're preventing offensive materials being released. So I'd have to take that on notice as to whether we do or don't. The record is the record. Interestingly, of course, it's a discussion roundtable. The only thing that really matters from a council perspective is what you resolve at a meeting. All other the materials and discussions is secondary to that process.
I've got a question or two, if that's all right. Is it possible to do a wired-in solution, Director? I know that our system is meant to be state-of-the-art, but we do experience significant interference. Is it something that we can sort of have the wired solution so we can turn it on, and if that doesn't work, we've got a backup in the wireless? Is that been factored into this planning? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We're probably moving away from what the item is about, which is live streaming of the meeting. I think the technological solution, at the time, if council resolved to do something, we would be looking for the best and most up-to-date technological solution. I don't know how old this equipment is, but I'm sure there would be more modern versions around now than applied at the time.
A second question. It goes on the comment that you were going to do it all together. Two questions. The slight delay, what did you have in mind? Is it 30 seconds? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? And who operates that? Is the mayor got a button here and says, look, nah, you're out, catch you later, you're not even on TV anymore? Or is that something that's operated apolitically, essentially?
There are a number of hypotheticals in that. Certainly the mayor does not have a big red button because otherwise the mayor would be interfering in the recording of council's process. The mayor's function is to control the meeting as the presiding member, not to interfere with what's recorded to the meeting. So the principle being would usually you have a delay, and it would be a staff member stopping the recording in order to present or prevent certain materials going out. Again, in the other examples used, Vincent initially, they didn't film any of the people making a question, so you'd see people come to roster and you wouldn't see their face for the protection of privacy. When someone comes here, they might want their details to be made public in a way, or people to see that they've been at a council meeting. So there are a lot of technicalities in your question. A lot will depend upon, firstly, what's council's resolution. Do you wish to move to a live video streaming, or do you wish to, and therefore put it into the mix to apply with the upgrade of the equipment? If you did, and at that time, we would have to look at a number of protocols. Another protocol and potentially cost is from an accessibility perspective. Coburn introduced live captioning. So someone sitting at home with a hearing impairment could sit there and see what was being discussed, but also read what was being discussed. That adds thousands of dollars more to the cost of live streaming, but from a universal accessibility perspective, it's consistent with doing things in accordance with our date. But the costs will continue to grow. So these are decisions for council that have to make after you've made a decision as to you wish to live video stream, live audio stream, or retain the current status quo.
Councillor Holland, did you have another question? And then I'll get to Councillor Barry after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor, just promoted you. I can't see what the difference between live audio streaming and live video streaming has with any of the potential risks. I can't see the difference whether you're saying live video, maybe it'll be out there instantaneously, well, so will live audio. So I can't see how you can differentiate between the two as far as risk goes. They're both identical, aren't they? That's the question. How can you differentiate between? They're both live. So it'll be out there. Your 24-hour media cycle or whatever you were commenting on before would be applicable to both, wouldn't it? Would it not?
Director?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just waiting for the live pause so I can answer the live question. With an audio recording, if we had a member of the public come up here and make statements and you couldn't see who it was, then it's very hard to then tie down anything that an individual may have said. With a video record, you can see who was speaking as well as hear the voice. That's where the difference comes, and it's probably the only real difference. One of the things about the audio recordings, if you're getting councillors just interjecting across and say, well, that wasn't me, you didn't see my lips moving, but on a video recording, you would see people speaking. Again, coming back to the type of solution you wanted, some of the councils, when elected members are speaking, just as you asked your question a minute ago, Councillor, the camera system would pan to them and you would see it was them. A remark coming from the chamber might be picked up in the audio, but it wouldn't be seen on the video record.
I don't see the point in what you've said there whatsoever, to be quite honest. If the video is not going to pick up everything, yeah, we know that. If someone comes up to the rostrum up there to say, they've got to say their name and address anyway, so they've been identified anyway. I know the camera's not going to pick up everybody. Councillor Sweeney makes an interjection. The only way we can tell now is probably by voice recognition. You just did. And we know it was Councillor Sweeney. So I don't see the relevant. I'll leave it at that. Sorry, that should have been a question.
I think you do the voice recognition around the table very, very well. But would you know all the voices for every member in the gallery? And if you don't know the voices, and we've had half the people here tonight are visitors. If one of them made statements and somebody wanted to say, look, I take offence at what they said, well, who was it? You would be able to pick up my voice, your voice, just by recognition, but people coming to the chamber, you can't. If the cameras are on the people in the chamber, you can see who's speaking and therefore whatever interjections are used. And hence I'm saying it's a minor increase in the risk, but it just increases the risk to them.
Councillor Barry, you got a question?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yeah, look, just a question, and there's been a few. I mean, the risk, excuse me, the risk analysis, I suppose the question is that under normal circumstances, over the time that I've been back here, the chair always, if there's a problem with what someone said, the chair will pull them up on that. The other thing is the question, well, is that correct for the point of view of a question?
Director?
It's a function of the presiding member under our standing orders to keep control of the meeting. Yeah. The presiding member cannot be held responsible for anything that any individual says. No. So he or she in that role might say, look, you shouldn't have said something, but once you've said it, it's in the public domain and recorded.
I suppose the next question is, once again, from the risk perspective, relating to what Councillor Spencer-Teo says, from a confidentiality point of view, are we as the council going to protect the individual that says that? Because if somebody does take umbrage as to what is said, and last night was an example, and if that is to be used in a court of law, we surely can't edit anything out of that. Is that correct or not?
Director?
I don't know whether you can or you can't. I don't believe you can. That's just a personal opinion. You need to seek a lawyer's legal advice on it. But the general principle is what's said in the chamber and is recorded. We don't have a right to come back and tamper with those records.
No. And the question then is that, just given that we have our normal audio and not live streaming, the press was all over us today. I mean, and while I'm up, I'll say that I was rung by the West Australian and I made comment, but I directed them to the audio to verify what I said or my point of view. So even with the one we've got now, what would be the risk difference between live video? And another question, just to finish off, so I'm not here all standing up all night. In 5, Dennis McLeod says, given that local government meetings are generally open to the public and deliberations of complaints, a body may need to be open to ongoing public scrutiny, and if the complaints process is streamed online, the complaints body may be subject to an uncomfortably high level of public scrutiny of its deliberative and decision-making processes. In our investigations, or will we, before maybe the next meeting, can we find out from those local governments who do have it, whether that is the case or not, just as a question to them, seeing I'm sure they would have provided you with some other information than just, yeah, we got it. Is that possible?
Thank you. Yes, Director?
Thank you. The commentary from Mr McLeod is his opinion.
Yes.
So asking other local governments what they think about an opinion of another lawyer won't add anything to our meeting. I'm trying to see what's the intention.
Excuse me, that's not my question. My question is that what he's saying is that uncomfortably high level of public scrutiny will happen. My question is, for all those councils that are using live video streaming, do we know, or can we ask, to the point of view, how much extra complaints have come in? Because the risk is with us and with yous and with the public. We can't protect anybody.
Yep. Director?
We're not children.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, we're happy to ask them about the complaints. I can only cite one example from my memory where what a young member of council said at that particular meeting at night and made some inappropriate remarks was then materials used in a standards panel complaint against them, but it was live, it was instant, it could be recorded and presented as part of the evidence. And so
once the ball's fired.
That's right, once you've said what have you said. So I have said, coming back to the principle here, I said it's just to say what the levels of risk are. They're incremental on the way through. If you were the Channel 7 news operator last night and wanted to get the story, you could have watched all of what we said in the news cycle, because they finished printing their papers around 10, have their story, put it in the paper, and it didn't even need to ask you because you were seen saying what have you said last night, and I don't know what that question were.
With what we would consider to be our outdated system that was out in the press today. So it really doesn't make much difference. And, you know, I mean, like I said, I mean, we're not here to protect anybody. I think if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Thank you.
I hope you didn't bring a sword tonight, Councillor. Councillor Kunz.
Through the chair. Just with respect to all the questions and commentary that's been going on, Director Kane, sorry, I guess the example you provided of live audio recording and being the potential to, I guess, have it delayed and block if someone was racially vilified, how would that be any different to editing it subsequent? It's the same premise. You're editing the recording of what's being provided to the public. And second of all, is I guess in terms of questions about risk assessment, is it not the fact that if someone in the gallery was to racially vilify someone, as your example was, the reality is that right now under our current system, we would at least have the capacity to mitigate the damage of getting it out there, and I guess preventing the embarrassment of that person potentially by actually editing it. Whether people believe it's the right thing to do or not, from a risk assessment, is that not the point? That right now we have the ability or the capacity to edit it.
Director?
You would have the ability to mask what was being said and use the example coming back of people getting up and swearing in public. And when you are on radio and you make a statement, they're still recording everything you say in the studio. They just choose to blank out anything because it gives offence to the listening public. That's the only type of editing I think you would ever and consider in this, because otherwise you are tampering with what is being used or said in debate. But I said all of these questions are secondary to the questions before you tonight. If you are going to live stream, is it the audio live stream or is it the video and audio live stream? And if you're going to then subsequently consider the video live streaming, to what extent do you want to make it as interactive an experience as possible? Because that's the bit that increases the cost.
Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor?
Yeah, well, I guess there's also the option of not doing anything. I guess that's why people are asking about why there's, in terms of the risk assessment and so forth, and trying to recognise why there's risk assessment put here with respect to defamation and so forth. I guess the risk is that you have no capacity. And well, if you had someone masking it, I think editing is the wrong word. I think masking is probably the correct way to put it. How is that any different to masking it subsequently? I mean, the only difference, I'd imagine, that you'd have more control doing it later, because if someone wasn't there to press the button to mask it. And then second, in terms of mitigating any embarrassment, there is an option of doing nothing. Is that not prudent?
Director?
I think there are more statements of fact, and you could do nothing tonight. You could leave the status quo as it is and consider that risks and other costs and other things are such that you don't want to change. I'm not here I think, I don't know if I've answered your question here, but I'm not quite seeing what technical advice else you want me to give.
Councillor Ponaturo.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a quick questions, very quickly. Director Kane, did you, one of the questions, the email I sent was about asking the pricing with other councils who have implemented systems, and I have looked at it, town of Vincent, City of Stirling, all of them are very impressive. I must say that the way they have handled it, and because I suggested that you can ask their pricing, so also you can ask the pros and cons about that. So that's my first question, whether did you actually make the contact? So obviously I made time to write that question. And the other thing is I'm a bit disappointed to see the local government, the state government actually had a panel reviewing the local government acts last year and implementing that in the state government parliament. So do you mean to say that they didn't think about all of this risk in the recommendations? So because we often talk about Department of Local Government, we go to them, we run to them for a number of things, and so how come we are not even respecting the parliamentary decision on adopting this local government panel review? As very clearly said, I'm sure they must have done a better risk study than us. And also I would like to ask the question through Deputy Mayor to CEO, one question: has it ever been any audio been edited in City of Canning, and if that case, has it been informed us? So because why is it coming up often that and that being discussed here? So there are three questions in this. Thank you.
CEO?
To my recollection, there hasn't been any editing of any audio, but I do recollect that an indiscretion on my behalf was recorded on the audio, and that was the only thing that was edited out. So that was at the end of the meeting. So So that's the only occasion, but any other occasion, absolutely not. It's not, certainly it's a comment I made when we talked about this before, that we would not edit anything because we would then be accused of manipulating what information that was available to the public. So.
Thank you, and I'll leave the other two questions for Director Kane, because given that only less than 24 hours we were in this same chamber last night, we had a marathon discussions about transparency and openness and responsibilities of ourselves, and I can't believe, and less than 24 hours we are talking, or we don't want to expose anything. Thank you.
Question there, or did you want to turn it into a question? I just want to leave it like that. Okay, so that was like an answer to the question that you asked. Okay, good. Anybody for any more? Oh, you have some more.
No, I've already asked two questions to Director Kane. I'm waiting for the response.
I think from memory, the first question is about Queensland and the technology at council's use in Queensland and the costings associated.
Sorry, not Queensland. Did you actually speak with other councils when you spoke about the pricing, about...
So the technology supplier who's referred in here is the sole supplier of this equipment in Western Australia. So they were able to provide all of the costings for all of the other local governments involved. As I said, the capital cost is not that great. It all depends upon what level of capital spend you want to do and the degree of recording, panning around, picking up members of the public, showing what's on the screen. That's where the cost variation will go.
Happy with that? If everyone's happy, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you. Next item is CC 011821, Deed of Variation to Lease, Rostrata Family Centre. The recommendation is on page 14, councillors, of the agenda, and should be coming up on your screens. It's already there. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Barry?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yeah, on page 19.11 and 12, it says it's in relation to the peppercorn rent and BR01. Now, I think it basically says that the $1 rent was, peppercorn was there before the schedule of fees and charges, but if I remember in BR01 it says that if you're going to release, you would have to pay. We have our minimums for not-for-profits, etc. But 12 says consideration will be given to the appropriate rental at the time of the new lease negotiations. My understanding is if we're going to do this, we surely must have had some negotiations with the whoever is leasing the place, Department of Communities. I'm sure they're not so much in poverty that they probably can't either afford the 790 or 1200, whatever the normal minimum rate is, and or then I assume that they still have to do the rubbish and the security. Is that correct or not?
Director?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Noting that this is not a new lease, it's a variation to an existing lease. The provisions of the policy don't then set general lease review provision, but we do charge outgoings on all of our leases. I said I wasn't here when the original peppercorn lease was negotiated. Maybe Director McQuaid can add some other context to that.
Next question, please. Sorry.
No, I also wasn't here at the time, and as per Councillor Kane, Director Kane's response, sorry, I'm promoting him, perhaps. Compliment. Director Kane, the discussions we'd had as this is a variation to the lease and not an extension of the lease, and the fact that the lease will be renewed at the end of 2023 was the reasoning behind not seeking to make that adjustment at this stage.
Director Kane is available to read in BR01. If it's a variation of a lease, we still can continue with the peppercorn rent. Is that correct?
Director?
Thank you. As far as I know, yes, because it said fundamentally we're not changing the original lease.
Yep.
So I don't know what negotiations, and presumably was it brought before council at the time it was set, and therefore whether the policy was even in place when this particular lease was set. But as Director McQuaid says, the time for us to reconsider the basis for charging is when the lease term has expired in 2023, and then it's open to council or the city to review that.
Microphone, please.
Pass on to me that particular section of BR01 because I'd be interested in reading it. Because I thought when BR01 came in, everything before it fell away. And these were the new rules. And Peppercorn, can you please provide how many leases are still Peppercorn within the city as well?
Director?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That's a question not specifically related to the item. I don't know. Under outstanding orders, is that something normally dealt with at this? If not, I'll take it offline.
Or could you rephrase it to make it more relevant, Councillor?
The words in the agenda, I'm only referring to the wording of the agenda. If we're talking about we may not be able to give them Peppercorn rent, or we may, I'm asking, how many other leases in the city getting are Peppercorn?
And I think the Director would like that on notice because I don't think he could answer that off the top of his head.
I don't know, I haven't got to take it on notice. I mean, I don't want the answer now.
And I'm just saying it's simply, unfortunately, because the way the policy, I'm presuming your outstanding order is the same as others, that questions have to relate to the nexus of the report and the item. So questions about all leases and which are Peppercorn and not Peppercorn wouldn't be relevant to this. As an issue, though, take it offline. I'm happy to go back and get that information for you.
So you'd be happy to write an email, maybe, Councillor? Thank you. Well, yeah, just take it offline. Thanks. Okay, thank you. Councillor Kunz, and then we'll go to Councillor Holland. Thank you.
Just to clarify some comments regarding 2023, do they not have an option? Does this not expire till 2033?
Director?
That's a question I'll have to go and take on notice. I think, through the Chair, the question there relates specifically to the application of the BR01 and the policy of Peppercorn, and therefore if the Peppercorn were to be, if they had a lease extension that goes out to 2031, would it potentially carry those payment terms out to that end? Is that what you're asking, Councillor?
No, would they not just exercise their option in the lease under the arrangements that were signed? Why we wouldn't be looking at a new lease in 2023? They've got an option in 2023 to extend, don't they?
Would you like to add? Who would like to answer that question?
Okay. Dr. McCoy was very quick to the microphone and very quick to leave it behind. It's the advantage of live audio. We can look, but if I had a lease that went out to 2031 and I didn't need to come back and have it varied, then I'd leave it in that position. This lease does need to be varied because the amount of the land and the additional assets is being added to the lease. So as to whether, though, coming back, it gives us any other opportunity in that time frame to consider a review of the price, I'm happy to go back and look at that.
Councillor Holland?
Thank you. Isn't the only reason that we're giving a variation of lease is because the upgrade is going on to more land? That's purely the reason for this. If that upgrade or whatever it was going on to the same area of land, there would not be need a variation of lease at all. Is that not correct? The second question is, if that's the way, it's just a variation of lease, therefore the terms of the original lease that are in there would still remain the same, because the only reason we've varied it is because we've included another part of our land. So whether it's got a 10-year option and so forth, which it has in going to September 33, that would just be automatic if they wanted to extend that. Is that not correct?
Director?
Thank you, in part because, as noted in paragraph 16, had the proposed building works fallen within the Hackshire area above, the description of the premises as listed in the lease would be sufficient to extend to the new improvements, and no lease variation would be required.
Therefore, because it's a variation like that, then it's a variation, not a new lease, then the terms of the original lease would still stand with the option. Is that not correct?
Director?
Quite possibly so. I just need to read the lease to make sure that's.
Is there any more questions, councillors, for this item? If not, we'll move on. Thank you. We'll move on now to CC 01921, proposed road closures, proportion of Layla Street Road Reserve and portion of road reserve within Queen's Park open space. The recommendation is on page 23 and should be on the screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions regarding this item? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Is the closure of the portion of Layla Street Road Reserve required for the Layla Street streetscape parking upgrade? Thank you.
Director?
That probably should go rather to Director Bowe.
That's right, I said Director. Sorry, Director Bowe.
I'm happy to take that question on notice, Mr Deputy Mayor, and provide a response to Councillor Bain.
Happy with that? Is there any other questions on this item, councillors? No, I see none. We'll move on. CC 02121, late item, monthly financial report, April 2021. The recommendation is on page 2 of the circulated late report and is on the screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions? I know probably Councillor Barry will have one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yeah, on page 14 or 5 of the agenda, it has Project 8 Bentley 26 John Street Capital Works. And once again, I noticed the under contract signs went on the sign today, but it says, and we did pass this some time ago, delays with the contract execution have subsequently delayed the payment of certain expenses. Are you able to enlighten us on that? Through you, whoever, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Whoever would like to answer can answer. Thank you.
Thank you. As a capital works project is under Director Bowe's control, and the timing of it, I'll have to leave him to answer that. Maybe he'll need to take it on notice.
I think I might, if I could, Mr Deputy Mayor, ask Mr O'Connor, Chris O'Connor, our Manager of Lands, to address that query.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we, as Council is aware, the decision to approve the sale to RK Health happened back at the February Ordinary Council meeting. There's been, at that point in time, there was no formalised contract between the two entities, so the certain expenses that go with the spending of particular things with the process of preparing the contract have been delayed. So it's not to say that those expenses have gone away, it just means that the actual payment of those has been delayed and will carry over in the next couple of months now that it is officially under contract as of last week.
I suppose the question then is, given that we're in the last week or two, I'm just wondering why, unless it was something that was unavoidable, the fact that we seem to be low on cash, etc., why something like this for $2.7 million wasn't expedited. Is there an answer to that, please?
Same series?
I'm happy to answer that, and I don't know if Mr Adewale has his thumb drive here with him and the liquidity chart. You want to just bring that down and give it to governors to pluck in?
Want to say anything while we're getting that ready? It might take a few minutes. Any other questions? And we'll hold that. And no. Okay, we'll wait for this then. anticipate someone wants to speak to this chart? Okay, so he's got a microphone somewhere? Or? Okay, and has he got a microphone set up? Okay, or yeah, that one, or this one, anyone up there, whatever.
So we prepared this to pick up the questions that it's often been asked us, why don't we need to borrow at certain stages? And we'll give you a copy of this. Mr. Atawala has only just incorporated in the monthly figures. The lines are intended to show you, the red line, the movement of cash coming into the business. So the lines down, the bars will show you our quantum per month, both in and out. There are three sources of cash that typically come into a business or you can use to fund your operations. First one is operating cash. Now the operating cash is what we get in from our rate revenue. So if you look at the operating cash position in July, the little red line is a long way down. In fact, it's between two horizontal blue lines, and I'll explain that in a minute. The rate notices come in, and the rates give us a big injection of cash, but we are progressively using that cash. The cash going out is going out to fund operations and to fund capital projects. So the other secondary source of cash you have is cash from your financing activities. So the cash from finance activities is when we are going to borrow money from the West Australian Treasury Corporation, and Council adopts that as part of its budget. There's also cash from investing activities. So we buy and sell assets and that comes back into the city. But there are two types of cash which we just can't use for general operating or capital purposes. The first one is cash which is derived, called restricted cash. So when we sold, for instance, certain land parcels just recently, and they were under TPS 42, is it 42, where it's in the Canning Vale industrial area?
33.
33. It's got a restricted purpose, which means we can't use that cash for anything else. If we get cash in for bonds, we can't use it. It's sitting in our bank, but we can't spend it to fund day-to-day operations. We also have cash in there for reserves, and many of those reserves have restricted purposes. So, for instance, our waste reserve, we can only use the cash in there for those purposes. When that little red line hits the threshold, which is that top blue line, which is the total value of the cash for the cash there, that's the threshold at which we run out of cash that we have available to use, which isn't restricted or placed in a reserve. It's at that point when your operating cash, which you've been collected, is now gone, and you need to start to draw on your cash from financing purposes. Again, the financing purpose is drawn down from loans. So answer your question. If the money had come in from RHA Health, was it a cash that you could use for general purposes? You couldn't use it to fund the operations of the city because, as you know, we take the cash in from land sales and we hold it specifically only to use for other land purchases or occasionally, if council's approved in the budget, for land and building projects. If we had that cash, it wouldn't stop us needing at that point in time to go and borrow for the last couple of months to complete the rest of our projects. So the fact that it hasn't come in has no impact on our ability or our liquidity, if that makes sense to you.
Would you like to add to that? If there's any questions, have the expert here? No? We have Councillor Sweeney. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just on that question, Director Kane, through the Deputy Mayor, just to get a better understanding then of this process, at what point does the money come into the bank of the City of Canning? At what point of that whole process? Is it at settlement, before settlement?
So it depends on the type of cash. From an operating cash comes into us on a daily basis. That cash is from our rates. The cash from sale of land, it depends whether it's a conditional sale or an unconditional sale. If the sale is somehow conditioned and there's a deferred settlement, for instance, on it, it might mean that you've sold a parcel of land. It was subject to development conditions being approved, a development application being required to be approved, or something else, then you mightn't get the cash, even though you have sold it, until all of those conditions are met.
So when would we visibly see it in our books? At what point?
So the moment the cash transaction is completed, the land sales and exchange are completed, at the settlement date, the cash is handed over. That's a requirement of settlement. If you give you an example at the moment, one that's going through a very protracted settlement, the Metronet land, the parcel of land that we have sold to the state government to facilitate the train station, they have quantified the parcel of land. The taking orders are applied to it so they can access and use our land. The actual value we're going to get for it is going to be calculated and will only be disclosed that maybe in months to come. A final settlement of that might still take place until all the land surveying and everything else is complete. So even though it's a significant parcel of cash, I think it's $5 or $6 million we're waiting to come in, the decision to sell, the exchange of land, the use of the land has happened, and we mightn't see our money for a year.
And so the calculations for the sale of that land haven't been included in any of our financials before settlement date. Is that what you're saying?
So the valuations, etc., have been completed, will have been concluded prior to settlement date. The settlement date is just the exchange of the cash. But if you looked at that, think about the start of the year. If we were suddenly expecting to see all of that cash from the land sales come into our coffers, they're not there. And even if they were, because of the restrictions to it, we couldn't use it unless it's for a specific purpose tied to the use of that particular reserve. You can see the glide path we're on now. The opening value of our cash down here will be pretty much close to what we are predicting or see as the closing value of our cash this year.
So to be clear, the sale of John Street is not included in any of those figures that we're looking at the moment?
The sale of John Street?
John Street, the sale.
Not the,
it hasn't settled yet.
No, it's not settled.
So
that
hasn't been included anywhere in the figures that we're looking at?
There's no, from a cash perspective, it's not.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
No worries. Councillor Barry?
So then, basically, in relation to any land we have sold, is it just the land utilisation that's quarantined in land and building reserve? Or where, for argument's sake, if that one in Canning Vale, if we were to get the money in for that before June, where would that go? The reason I ask the question is, and you may have said it and I may have missed it, what is the red line? What is that money? Is that just rate money?
So that rate money is cash that we can actually use, to draw down on cash we can use. Yeah. In our budget, we may have included cash transfers from various reserves. So somewhere along the line, say we bought a piece of plant, somewhere along the line in there's a purchase of a piece of plant. Yeah. The money is going out in this line. We're able to draw on the reserve that's specifically for the plant or the equipment reserve. That money would come back in and we would be able to transfer it and use it going out.
So is that just a municipal fund, the red line?
No, it's all total cash. Total cash going out of the business. Cash that we have used either from one of three sources. Our operating cash, which is basically, say, rates, income, fees and charges. It's cash from our investing activities. We've sold something, we've got money back from it, it's now there, like a piece of plant, or it's cash from financing. Now, I'm saying it's not cash from financing because at this stage we haven't drawn down on our loans because we have managed to keep this red line above the area which was restricted cash. The moment once it hits below that, we then now to use cash from our financing activities.
Okay, so another question. So what we're saying is that the cash from John Street, you can't use it because it's going into land and buildings. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
So to fund day-to-day operations, no, you can't use it. If council in its budget had said, for instance, from land and building reserve, we are going to, as it has, transfer $500,000 to be used to facilitate the boiler replacement at Leisureplex, which council did. We would be able to draw down on that land and building reserve and transfer $500,000 to our operating account to pay for those repairs, which are underway at this particular point in time.
Okay, so conversely, if we buy land from the municipal fund and then land utilisation sells it in 12 months' time, does that then go into the land and building because it came out of the municipal fund? So that's usually used for operational. So conversely, does that happen or not?
So no money will come out of the municipal fund for the land purchases. They will come out ultimately out of the land and building reserve or borrowings. If we have borrowed, the interest cost has got to be charged back to the land and building reserve. The intention is that all your land transactions are independent then of what you need as cash to run the day-to-day operations.
Is there any more questions regarding this item? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Can the city advise as to the expected completion date of the sports lighting project at Coker Park, please?
Yeah, I can advise Councillor Bain, but I'll take it on notice and give you an accurate date for that.
And on another matter, with the Albany Highway bus lane extension, can the city advise when or if Centre Group has put forward a date of the start of construction works in regard to the pedestrian overpass? Thank you.
Director Brad, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That particular bridge, given it's a main roads asset, obviously it goes over Albany Highway Road Reserve. Centre Group have liaised with PTA and Main Roads WA in relation to the design of that bridge. Full detailed plans have been submitted, and I understand there has been a fair bit of traction the last couple of weeks, and we're hopeful to get a commencement date shortly, and I'll obviously advise Council when that update comes through in the next couple of weeks.
I've been waiting a while for that bridge overpass. Thanks. Any more questions on this one? If not, councillors, I would beg you for 5 minutes. I need to go to nature calls, and since I'm running solo here tonight, I propose we reconvene at 8 o'clock sharp on this, so 5 minutes essentially, if that's okay. Thank you. So this is a 5-minute convenience stop. Thanks. Asked to someone of benefit of the gallery. Look, I'm going to bring forward, the director's been asked and he's asked me, and I agree. I'm going to bring forward EN 00721, motion carried at the annual general meeting of electors 21 March 2021, reinstated and restoration of land at Shelley Beach. The recommendation is on page 69 of the agenda, is on the screen now. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Coons?
With respect to the relevant residents' desire to make sure that the relevant obligations under the Swan Canning River Protection Strategy are met, I recognise that staff are saying that it's being done within appropriate budget constraints. Well, the city feels as though they're hitting it, but would it be much work to actually prepare a response to say what the city is actually, I guess, through you, by the way, Chair, that we are, I guess, hitting everything relevant to it to actually, I guess, illuminate Mr. Suan, because it's been, I guess, an issue for him for quite some time, to actually show that to the community?
Director?
Yes, that is possible, Mr Deputy Mayor. Certainly a response has previously been provided to Mr Suan on this line of questioning previously, so we can review our records and review the response and provide some comment in the agenda if that meets the needs of the Council. Councillor Goodser?
Any follow-up? Yep, thank you.
And just to follow up, would it take much city resources to actually, I guess, investigate the feasibility of reclaiming any of that land, as Mr. Sawn said. I note a concurrent thing that the city's doing is seeking expressions of interest on a POS, a public open space contribution scheme, given the relevant, the fewer amount of proportion of public open space in Shelley. Would it be, just in terms of a holistic view, be a lot of work to actually look at the feasibility as to what the constraints would be to actually look at a process of going down that path? I imagine, I know back in the 60s when they did it, it was a bit easier than what they do now. But given, I guess, the residents' ongoing questions about this, I just wondered whether it would be a lot of work to actually work out the feasibility of what he proposes.
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I certainly am unable to recall what happened in the 60s, Councillor Kunza. However, it must be said that the request to consider this action has previously been reviewed by my staff and I, and we have already identified the constraints, and the constraint primarily is the DBCA, and any approval and the engagement that we've had with that department has been fairly clear on whether or not they would consider a proposal from the city to undertake this work. So I think the work, if we'd got past that gateway, would be significant, but we've never got past that gateway of inquiry on this particular matter, Councillor Kunza.
Councillor.
Just to follow up through, Chair. So what you're saying is the DBCA doesn't look favourably towards providing approvals for it. In regard to what you just commented on, I didn't quite understand what the advice from the DBCA was.
Yes, certainly we fielded these inquiries from Mr. Suhan previously in my time here at the City of Canning, dating back to 2017. And we have undertook to engage with the relevant department about this proposal, and my understanding is that staff have been told that the DBCA would not consider it. As a result, we've done no further work in that space, but I'm happy to revisit it if that assists the council in making their decision next week and provide some comment in the agenda report.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that'd like to ask a question? Nobody? Okay, well, we'll go back to where we started, and thank you, Mr. Stone. If you want to stay with us, feel free. If you want to leave, that's good too. Whatever you like. Thank you. I know you will be. I'll see you next week. Okay, councillors, moving along. This is a bit of a bigger one. CC 02421. Proposed land purchases of Water Corporation assets and easements for city-owned East Cannington Reserve. And I'll just write my little time here on the sheet here, so I know what we're doing. Okay. Any questions for this one? Oh, that was easy. We'll move on before anyone changes their mind. Next one is 7.3, Mr. Graham Bride, Director Canning Development, CD 01521, motion carried at the annual general meeting of electors 25 March 2021. Authority to make decisions on building applications. The recommendation is on page 47 and it's should be on the screen now. Councillors, do I have any questions? We'll go with Councillor Sabiri first because Councillor Barry would like you to go first. That's what I think he's indicating. Okay.
Oh, now,
not ready.
One minute you're telling me to stop talking. Just one question. I mean, I understand obviously the Kendall report and et cetera, but the planning stuff, if council wishes to, they can revoke or take back a delegation by an absolute majority. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor, certainly council gives delegation to administration. It can take it back.
Yep.
It can do what it likes in terms of that delegation limits and the conditions it puts on the delegation.
Yep. The only other query I'd have is on page 67. It says all other matters from the day-to-day operation of local government should be delegated through the Chief Executive Officer. Now, that must mean exactly the same. So any delegation can come back if council wants it and wishes with a majority of 6.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Yeah, certainly there's delegations through the CEO, and then there's the ability to sub-delegate those to obviously staff based on their experience and depending on what the conditions are. So, yeah, certainly all the delegations, council has the power to give delegation to staff to make decisions or keep a lot of delegation and refer those matters to council.
And just one other question from an internal perspective, because I don't quite know how it works, because, I mean, if council takes back a delegation, and I don't know whether you want to rule on this, whether it's relevant or not.
Into your question, Councillor.
Right, no, I think I'll leave it. Maybe I'll massage it a bit for next week. Thank you.
You give it a bit of time, you can think about it, and might come back to you if you get the massage correct. Councillor Sabiri.
We're just wondering how many applications does the city receive a year that are, I guess, discretionary use? Is that the 300 that you've mentioned, or is there more or less?
Go.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We've focused in the report on the number of residential applications that we are required to assess under the design principles of the R codes. So that 300 relates to residential development. In terms of other discretionary decisions, you're looking at the commercial industrial applications. That would probably add another 150 applications on top of that. So there's probably around 450 discretionary decisions that the city makes each year.
Councillor Spencer-Tear.
You touched on it earlier, sorry, through you, Deputy Mayor, regarding even if things like this did come to council, SAT could overturn them anyway. Was that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Even if the delegation was restricted and more applications came to council, the council would be making decisions of a quasi-judicial manner, and they would be required to look at the planning law principles of the matter, and they have to sit in a judge-like position and consider those planning merits. And as you said, the applicant, if they're not happy with the council decision, could go to the State Administrator Tribunal to seek a review of council decision.
Follow up, thank you.
Which would mean that council would need to defend its decision, so we would have to hire a lawyer and defend that, wouldn't we?
Director?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. And if the council decision was not consistent with the officer recommendation, as you could appreciate, staff couldn't be then a professional witness for the case. So potentially, depending on the level of the decision, it may require a planning consultant and a lawyer that would have to be engaged. As I said in the report, a simple matter is probably around about $20,000 cost to the city. Certainly our SAT numbers at the moment are probably around 1 or 2 per year, which is quite low and probably quite consistent with a number of other Tier 1 local governments.
Councillor Sabiri.
When we have a discretionary use and processing that application, is there a public consultation, I guess, for the people who live in the area? Is there, do they get notified?
Councillor. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, certainly, depending on, there's obviously uses that require advertising and there's discretionary uses which don't. So if a land use requires to be advertised, we have got the public consultation policy that council's adopted. That identifies, I guess, the radius of the consultation area. So all those within that particular distance, whether it's 100 or 200 metres based on the type of land use, would be consulted and asked to comment. And as I said in the report, where applications don't involve residential applications, so when we're talking about the R-code applications at the moment, staff are delegated to make those calls. They're they're very minor types of applications. But in terms of all the other applications, commercial, industrial, if there's a requirement to advertise, it goes out to the public. If there's objections received, those are the applications currently that come to council, and they're the ones that generate probably the most potential to affect amenity. They're more contentious, and as I said in the report, there's a couple of examples like the Krispy Kreme, a couple of childcare centres. They're the ones that generate a fair bit of commentary from the community.
Do we have any more councillors to ask question on this item? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Is there a tipping point when it comes to objections received from the community in regard to businesses, industrial DAs? Thank you.
Director? Through Mr Deputy Mayor. Yes, certainly from our perspective, and the current delegations don't look at a number of submissions. We don't think an arbitrary number of submissions should generate a threshold. It should be based on the merits of each individual objection. So even if there was one objection and that was included valid planning concerns, we would certainly take that to council. That's what we have been doing over the past several years.
Any more questions on this item? Okay, we'll move along. 7.4, Mr Warren Bowe, Director Canning Environment. I'll just write the time down on this sheet here. 8:15 p.m. EN 00621, motion carried at the annual general meeting of electors, March 2021. Improved playground facilities at Shelley Beach Park. The recommendation, councillors, is on page 57 of the screen now. And do I have any questions, councillors? Councillor Spencer, to you.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. I'm trying to figure out where the confusion has come here, and I think it may be in the language. So through you, Deputy Mayor, to Director Bowe, would it be safe to say that the master plans provided to council and to public could be defined as conceptual master plans?
Director.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yes, that is correct. It's a concept master plan, and the next process would be to progress detailed design from which we would derive more accurate costings and prepare tenders for construction through that process.
Follow up, please.
And with those costings would also be scale of the amenities there as well, would it not?
Director?
Yes, Mr Deputy Mayor, Councillor Spencer Teo, a far more accurate scale of the development through the detailed design process.
Councillor Coons.
Just with regard to how the second point of the motion is worded, I guess the point is that, I mean, I was a bit surprised to see this recommendation as in the electors meeting a week after we made a decision on this, but basically the conceptual master plan has a district level playground that is almost about 4 times the size of the current playground. Should it really say that the size of the footprint of the proposed playground at Shelley Beach Park not be increased? I mean, to me that's a bit confusing to someone that doesn't read into the detail. Maybe it should say note that the footprint of the proposed playground will be increased.
Director?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Certainly my intention was to draw a line underneath the motion that came from the general meeting of electors and to indicate that we would progress with the master plan as per option 2 and progressed a detailed design there. And my view is that significantly increasing the area in which to install a district level playground should not be supported, because it departs from the endorsed option that council supported quite recently prior to the general meeting.
Can I just, I mean, if I was a member of the lay public, the reality is the master plan increases it to 4 times the size of what it currently is. If I was to look at that, I would basically be thinking that the proposed playground not be increased. I know that people in here understand what you're saying, but the reality is that the master plan increases the size of the current playground by 4 times. Hence why I was quite confused by the motion in the beginning.
Director?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'll take your point, Councillor Kunze. It wasn't intended that way, and the recommendation could be suitably amended at the OCM if required to give it a greater level of clarity for the elected members and the general public.
Councillor Kunze?
Just through comparison, so the Kent Street Weir master plan says that it's not to scale on the actual master plan. How big is the district level playground? I mean, I'll take that on notice, but how big is the district level playground proposed there?
Director?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I was looking to Mr. Johnson for some assistance there, but he's shaking his head. We can get back to you with some estimates on the precinct plan for Kent Street, Councillor Kunze.
Any more questions for this item? Okay. So that's next one's already been done. So we're going to flip the page. We're going to go to EN 00821, loan funding agreement, Willetton Basketball Association. Just going to log the little time in my sheet here. The recommendation is on page 86 of the agenda, is on the screen now. Councillors, where do I start with the questions here? Okay. Yep, sorry. If you'd like to
Thank you, Deputy
make the
Mayor.
declaration and
Yes,
then
thank
do what you
you,
need to do.
Deputy Mayor, I do have to declare an interest, a financial interest, so I will leave the room. Thank you.
We'll see you in about an hour's time. Repeat for the benefit of the councillors, please, Councillor.
Financial interest, I'm a member of the club.
Councillor, can you just use your microphone, please?
Sorry, Mr. Deputy Mayor, wouldn't that apply to anyone who's a member of any club? So previous ones should have been financial declarations as well.
I think with this, my understanding is that it's up to the discretion of the member. And look, if he feels that he wants to leave, then he can do that. If he feels that he doesn't want to leave, then it'd be entirely up to him. I'm not going to. My understanding is, there's nearly no precedent for what the council has done because he hasn't done this before. So it's difficult to compare to other councillors in other situations. Yes, Councillor Spencer here.
Just because you said that word precedent, can we get governance just to confirm in their opinion what type of declaration this should be, even though if Councillor Sweeney chooses to make it something else, because we don't want to set a precedent here based on something that doesn't quite reconcile with governance.
Is anyone able to help with this area? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The interest should be an impartiality interest, but as I've often said to elected members, you choose to declare your interest. It's your call. If you wish to make an impartiality, or if you choose to do any other thing, then it's up to you. But on seeing the declaration, I did query with the officer that handed it to me, why is this a financial interest? It should be an impartiality interest.
Councillor,
yes,
the call's yours.
well, I believe the decision rests with me, and I've chosen.
I'm happy to. Just wanted for the benefit of councillors, feel a little confused. I think that was benefit, and proceed as you feel fit. Thank you.
Mr Deputy Mayor, if I may say
Yes.
so, Councillor Sweeney, I walked out just because my daughter worked for a law firm. I walked out, so yeah, good on you.
Okay, so if we can proceed, if everyone's happy with that, thank you.
Put it this way, mate, just to clear things up, if I was in the room when this matter went before us for a vote, there is an extremely slim, almost no chance that I would not vote for this motion. Does that clear it up for everyone? Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And if you excuse yourself when you like, thank you.
I just want to...
Just quickly, because we need to move on to agenda briefing.
I know, but isn't it very clear if we are a financial member, that means whatever financially we provide to that club, then we benefit because we are a financial member. So isn't that very clear, or it should be to our discretion?
I think I'm being quite clear, and the CEO's been quite clear. We're leaving this call to the councillor. Yes, thank you. Okay, the recommendation is on page 86 of the agenda and is on the screen now. Councillors, questions? Councillor Barry.
Yes, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Through you to the appropriate officer, I note that in 8 of the key terms it says that the city will, are we going to take out a loan? Are we taking out a loan at 1.89% to give them the money to give back to us? Or is this left over and it's still in their bank? Or in some shape or form? I'm not quite sure.
Director?
Well, the money has already been provided to the club by the use of the previously endorsed, or council endorsed liquidity facility. So we aren't borrowing the money to then borrow to them. They already have the money. The money was the outstanding amount that they used to cash flow the delivery of the Willetton Stadium project, and it crystallised 30th of June last year.
So they're just paying back money to us at 1.89%, as it would be if it was a treasury loan. That's where I'm getting a little confused.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Barry. That's the recommendation, and that's the key terms that we support.
Just one other question. I believe in last year's annual budget, the basketball club received exemption of $50,000 in rates. Is that correct?
Director?
I'll have to take that on notice. I don't know the answer.
Okay, well,
Councillor Barry, we'll find that and provide that response in a
I'm
separate
just
cover.
wondering if it does come to the fact that they've got that exemption, I'm just wondering why they probably couldn't use some of that money to pay back the loan. But anyway, if you can get back to me, my information that I read, but you may see it different. Thank you.
Councillor Spencer-Tier.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I've asked a series of questions already and waiting on some information, but I just have one more. With the term of the loan, was that requested by the club, or has it been negotiated between staff and club? For example, did they start at 20 years and we worked them down to 10, or is that just their straightforward request?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. My understanding and my recollection of it was when the club first came to council and both requested the direct grant and assistance in their cash flow for the delivery of the project, that the 10-year term was mooted back then in late 2018 and 2019. So it has been a negotiated term, yes, 10 years.
Any more questions? Councillor Holland?
Yes, I brought this up a while ago as well, and it's got in here, in considering the request by WBA in relation to the cash flow deficit during construction, which I brought up the way that the funds were being allocated from the federal government and when they're going to come down to the WBA, which would be at the end of the contract, but they needed our loan so they would not go bankrupt or insolvent because of a cash flow situation. But I don't remember, if you can please explain, was requested to enable the short-term loan facility to remain in place for 12 months after construction was complete, with the understanding that any outstanding balance would be converted to a loan. Was that in any documents? If it was, I can't remember seeing it, that was to be converted to a loan. Was that part of the actual agreement, or rather you've just said here understanding?
Director?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. It certainly wasn't the resolution of Council that was passed in March when Council agreed to it, but it was certainly discussed at the strategic issues briefing, which in September 2018, which preceded the original decision in October 2018 to fund and loan the money to enable the Basketball Association to deliver the project. But I guess the direct answer is no, it wasn't a council resolution, but yes, the administration had worked towards an understanding that at the end of the project, any outstanding funds would be crystallised into a loan.
So, sorry, Mr Deputy Mayor, so it actually, like you're saying, it wasn't an actual council resolution to convert that to a fund, it was an administrative decision.
Well, yes, we've been working with the WBA for a number of years, and then through the council resolutions which supported the city's financial contribution to the project and the assistance in the cash flowing, WBA had certainly worked to the understanding with the administration that that would be referred through to council, and we would enable them to pay back the loan over a period of 10 years.
And that's what's happening now. Now, the other question, I can't quite understand the wording of this. Like I've said many times, I'm not an accountant. Number 2, that Council approves the budget amendment to the 2020-2021 budget by allocating 253 grand from the municipal funds pursuant. Well, how come we're allocating when they've already got the money?
They've had the money. Yes.
They've already had the money. So isn't this just more or less a paper thing? I don't understand how we can say allocating, sorry.
Director.
Certainly, thank you, Councillor Holland. The money is already in the budget. I think the word allocating is probably maybe right. It's just identifying this money for the purpose of the loan with the WBA. But I might ask Director Kane just to clarify.
Get Councillor, I don't know if he's been promoted or demoted, or do you guys just want to swap or change names or something like that? Director Kane, thank you.
Thank you. As far as I'm aware, Deputy Mayor, and to Councillor Holland, oh God, there goes my agenda. Paragraph 19 of the report refers to the issue of the budget deficit, so that those funds weren't forming part of the deliberations for council at the time it struck its budget. So we need to account for the 250,000. The opening position, as you're aware, for the start of the year was a deficit of 1.75 million. That's what we took through to the mid-year budget review. We're effectively adding an extra 250,000 budget deficit as a result of providing this loan.
So this was never in the budget, never put down anywhere in the budget, and we're now making a line entry into the budget. Is that what you're saying?
Through the chair, we have to account for the funds. So if council decides to formally loan the funds, which it hasn't decided to date, then that loan needs to come onto the city's books and be accounted for as a cash flow, and it's an additional deficit outcome because, as you say, there's no money in the municipal fund for it. It's being drawn from loan funds. So at the moment, the money's been taken from a general loan fund, but needs to be attributed to a specific account and budget, and it will increase the budget deficit to just under 2 million.
But the physical money was actually taken out of our bank account 2 years ago. The actual cash, you were talking about cash in the bank before, the physical money was actually taken and paid then. Sorry, I'm just not understanding. Can you explain
again, coming back without an accounting transaction to back it up. So we now need to do the accounting transaction because, as far as my staff and I are aware, it's not in the budget either at the time it was done. the decision of council to look at this outcome at the end of the construction period, which is only just finishing last year, and outside the budget cycle, it's not in the budget. It just needs to be accounted for now.
So then my question would be, why wasn't it? We gave them money and it was never an item in there that we gave them. Was there any paper trail that we've given them the money then? Actually given them the money? I'm not casting spell, I just don't understand.
Through the chair, I can't answer the question. What I do know is that the funds that have been used for the project on the basis that they were going to repay the loan, the association, the WA, has been paying the city back. So in effect, it's been acting as if it's had a formal loan agreement in place. But in the absence of having a formal loan agreement, there is no paper trail. Now this item needs to be concluded. We need to agree that either we loan them the money to facilitate this, or they go to the bank of wherever and borrow the money to pay the city back. But we need to be able to account for the cash.
I'll go with Councillor Spencer-Teo, thank you.
Would I be correct in saying that, I'm pretty sure I've seen it somewhere back in the day, that this loan to the Willetton Basketball Association is sitting on our balance sheet as an asset, and it was due to be repaid this year. Therefore, if it was going to be considered in a budget, it would be considered as money coming back into us to cancel out that asset. But now we're looking at basically extending that in the form of a loan.
Fundamentally, through the chair, that's basically it. So they were going to pay it back, they can't pay it back, they are paying back in instalments. We need to crystallise that in form of a loan agreement.
Can I just go to Councillor Ponatira? She did put her hand up about 5 minutes ago, and I sort of need to have some sort of system. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. But I could see that on the October 9, 2018, Canning Gazette reporting saying that the City of Canning will provide a short-term loan to cover the gaps between when the Willetton Basketball Association has to pay for the works and when it receives its government grant. So obviously there is some record is there. So there must be a paper trail there. And there must have been a debit from our cash. Just trying to even make sure that cash at bank, there must have been a debit transaction, because that's where the money went. And now all the principal and interest rates of the payment of all the 10-year one, we will credit against that. Am I right, Director Kane? There must be.
Director.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Effectively, the city has cash flowed this project, whereas that cash liability sits with the WBA. So we have paid it out effectively on their behalf, but that debt obligation belongs to them. So we now need to formalise that debt obligation. The cash is going to be accounted for, but in doing so, because it wasn't intended to be a debt the city would have, it was going to be paid for it, therefore it wasn't part of our budget deficit, which would have been $250,000 higher. In agreeing to this loan now, the other part of the transaction is our budget deficit goes up.
Councillor, continue, please.
Okay, thank you. Because given that they're given a very detailed explanation on the principal payment and interest payment over the next 10 years, so I think, but I'm just thinking, do you have to put one total figure, 253, or are you going to put for each year that particular amount, Director Kane? You may have got this particular Excel spreadsheet, which I have got.
Director.
Thank you. There's a formal loan agreement which stipulates their repayments, the interest and principal over the 10-year life that would come back to it. That would sit in the deed that's been written pending council's resolution on this. That has all of that information in it.
I've got one or two questions, if I may. Does anyone else want to ask questions, by the way? Sorry. Yep. No. You're massaging it still? Okay. Okay. I have two questions, pretty much direct. Plan B. If this, there's a decision next week and if it was not to be seen favourably by some of the council and not endorsed, is there a plan B for this organisation?
Mr Deputy Mayor, well, we could simply go back to the WBA and advise them that Council didn't resolve to support the crystallising of the outstanding balance at the conclusion of the project into the 10-year loan. But as I said before, we've been working in good faith with the WBA for a number of years, and that isn't my recommendation forward. But that would be a position or an action that we would undertake in the event that Council didn't support the recommendation.
And I've got a follow-up. This is my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or if I've misworded it. Is this essentially a repackaging of something that they had before into a new vehicle? Now, what certainty do we? And in life, you don't have, they say, there's two certainties: there's death and taxes. But in sort of a way that you can best describe it, are we fairly confident that they would not just, 10 years later say, oh, look, guys, we haven't done it and we need to do another deal?
I'm fairly confident, and the evidence which is contained in the Willetton Basketball Association's audited financial statements, which identifies the quantum of the loan to the City of Canning as a current liability, would indicate that they're aware of their obligation to repay the City, and simply we are formalising the arrangements that we've been working with the WBA towards over the last few years.
Councillor Coons?
Just following on from the Deputy Mayor's first question, in the risk matrix it basically says if it was declined by Council, the WBA would be required to seek commercial funding, and that interest funds would be going to commercial entities. What sort of commercial entities were staff hypothesising?
Director?
We weren't really hypothesising. I'm working on the assumption that they would undertake their due diligence and obtain funding from the best provider at the best for the best financial outcome for them to repay what they owe to us. So banks or other financial institutions is where I was thinking.
Councillor Coons?
But just to follow up, is it not the reality that sporting in local clubs, such as when we discussed this last month as well, don't really have the capacity to go to financial institutions because they don't actually own the asset that the debt is associated with?
I think the WBA's balance sheet would hold them in good stead for any negotiations with any financial institutions to pay back the $253,000 that's currently outstanding in the financial arrangements between us and the WBA, but that would be a matter for them to investigate.
Councillor Pontura. And Councillor Barry, are you nearly ready with your question?
No, thanks. I was trying to find it in the budget. I'm just wondering
We'll come back to you. We'll give time extension. Thank you. Councillor Pontura.
Thank you. Sorry. I know, even though we spoke about different clubs are in a different financial situation, given that Willetton Basketball Stadium's has got 4,500 people and their PNL looks fantastic. So I'm sure that, I know this is not a question, but I just wanted to make a note to the...
Make it a question like in a way that disguises...
No, I don't need to, but I'm just trying to answer the previous question from Councillor Coons. I'm just trying to make sure this is a totally different club. I just want to make it a point. Thank you.
So there's no question there? Okay, well, we'll just move right along. Councillor Smith-Tier.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. In the financials that were sent out today, it stated, I understand these were dated the end of June last year, but it said that the lease hadn't yet been executed with the city. Has that since been executed?
Director?
No, it hasn't been executed. The lease has been prepared and some legal advice has been obtained in relation to the execution of the lease. The key terms have been agreed and endorsed by Council back in 2018 and subsequently in March 2019.
So rent that they paid on their financials, is that along the same scale, or will they be getting a rent increase due to the expansion of the premises?
Director?
The rental has been agreed between the city and the WBA, and that's at $15,000 a year.
Anybody else for questions? Yeah, okay, keep going.
Also in the financials, it mentioned something about applying for the rent abatement. Were they successful in that? Which could explain why the rent was so low. I don't know.
Can anyone ask that question?
On notice?
I'm happy to take that on notice,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Barry, are you ready with your question? It's gone evaporated. I got one more question, if that's all right. I'll just phrase it as best I can. And just answer if you can, if you can't, that's okay. We've obviously had recently a similar item from a sporting club, and they've requested funds, and council made a decision, and councillors know what that is. Are we looking at, it's the same, eventually the same thing, or is it, Director, are you looking at a totally different arrangement where, because my understanding is essentially we own the asset, is it a totally different kettle of fish? Well, I suppose you own the land too, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. From my perspective, I believe that the administration has been consistent in dealing with the requests from both sporting organisations, and the recommendations reflect that. No more? Anyone for any more? Okay, next one. We'll talk about that next week again. Oh, yes. Do I go get him? Does someone go get him, please? Thank you. Forgot about him. That'll be a poor reflection on me. Just tell him that the Deputy Mayor forgot about him. Confess, Councillor, I moved on and forgot about you. Good. Okay, I'll just put this in my time. It's 8:45. We're moving on to 7.5. Dr. Sarah McQuaid, Director, Canning Community. We have on the agenda here tonight CO00321, Access Inclusion Advisory Group Unconfirmed Minutes. Councillors, the recommendation is on page 92 of the agenda and should be on the screen now. Councillors, do we have any questions regarding the minutes of this advisory group? No, seeing none, we will move on without delay. CO00421, Canning Community Men's Shed, funding support for leased extension. The recommendation is on page 106 of the agenda tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and you should be able to see it on the screen now. Councillors, do we have any questions? Okay, Councillor Coons.
When the report was written in paragraph 20, it cites a meeting between the two men's sheds. Was there any progress made at that meeting?
Director.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, so the meeting did go ahead on the 4th of May between the Canning Community Men's Shed and the Station Street Men's Shed. City officers have advised me that whilst it was a good conversation, and it's probably the first time that the two men's sheds have sort of come together and talked about collaboration in terms of not not programming things at the same time and looking at the equipment they have and how they might better target different audiences. There was no desire from either party to look to a co-location model or any further collaboration.
Any more questions?
Just from the point of view, I mean, for the last 2 years, I think we've put 25 grand per year. So are we saying now it's 15, and as I read it, they were going to pay 10? Is that correct? Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you.
Director?
Yes, that is correct. So the city has contributed $25,000 per annum for the past 2 years. At a meeting held at the mid-2020, and the city was advised that there'd been no further progress and obviously changes with the Lottery West funding. The former director of Canning Corporate and Community advised the group that they would need to consider revenue options for how they might contribute to any further lease costs to offset what the city could possibly contribute. So they have advised us that they are in the position to contribute $10,000 per annum to their lease costs for a further 2 years and are seeking $15,000 per annum from the city.
So is the 10,000 component of the men's shed, I mean, is that agreed? I mean, that is part of the deal?
That is part of the deal, and as per the recommendation, we're only asking the city to support $15,000 per annum.
They're not going to come back and say we haven't got the 10 now.
That's not what they have indicated to me.
Okay. And just one other thing. Excuse me, on page 172 and 5, it says, in relation to the, I think, Lottery West funding, it says that a building infrastructure project would not likely be considered in the foreseeable future. Then when we go down to 14, it says Lottery West intend to return to pre-COVID, blah, blah, blah. This framework would provide an avenue for the building infrastructure such as the proposed by CCM. So which one is it?
Victor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So at paragraph 5, at the meeting that was held in early January 2020, we advised the CCMS that Lottery West, due to their redirection of their funds to COVID-related priorities, that at that time they weren't funding any infrastructure projects. Lottery West have now, at item 14, we've now been advised by Lottery West that from 1 July 2021, they will revert back to their pre-COVID funding models and will have funding available for facility infrastructure projects.
Councillor Ponaturo, you good okay now? Okay. Councillor Kunz?
So in the comment, staff comment on, I guess, their concerns regarding the capacity of the men's shed to progress the planning. But is there any sort of, I guess, indication from the men's shed, given that it's been 2 years now and that the Lottery West funding is going to be available on the 1st of July, as to when they might be in a position to actually provide a submission? Because 2 years providing a submission, potentially getting rejected, building the facility, it's not a long time with how, I guess, slow/quick the time goes versus how slow things go.
Director.
They have indicated to us that they feel confident that they will be able to achieve it, and they did send me an email on the 3rd of May after the agenda was published to advise that they had commenced a business plan, and they have contacted Men's Shed WA and other men's sheds to provide some basis and support for that. But I think officers still do have some concerns and are encouraging them to engage someone to support them through the process. Obviously the city will provide advice, but we cannot do it for them. Other men's sheds, for example, Kalamunda, that was opened February, they had a project manager working with them, and that project manager is now working with the Station Street men's shed. So if they can engage someone to kind of support them through that process and guide them, then they should be able to get an application into Lottery West, and those applications are open year-round through Lottery West.
Any more councillors want to ask questions? Okay, one asked twice. Move on. 8, notice of motions for consideration at the next ordinary council meeting. There are none. Urgent business, there is none. Number 10, confidential matters. Council will now consider the confidential matters. I thank members of the public for their attendance tonight and ask that they please leave the chamber in order for the council to consider the confidential matters. And the time, I've got it as 7 minutes to 9 o'clock. Okay, I'll just close up. Closure, there being no further business, I now declare the agenda briefing closed at 9:18. I just wanted to say thank you for your attendance tonight and giving us time at the agenda meeting.